Welcome to another episode of Bourbon and Data Breaches, where we cover 5 of the most interesting breaches from this last week. I'm Steve.
I'm Connor. I'm Frank.
Well, this week we have stakes, chemicals, think tanks, startups, and airplanes when ransomware targets supply chain strategy and the systems behind the system. Starting off with story number 1, JBS Brazil. You guessed it, out of Brazil. This is a global meat processing giant. And looks like Coinbase Cartel has all the meats. That's right. Coinbase Cartel is claiming JBS Brazil. We have 3 terabytes of your data, is what they say. That's not a leak. That's a freight shipment. When attackers hit a company at the center of the global food supply chain, the impact can stretch from farmers to grocery stores. And I just have to say, is nothing sacred? Now ransomware gangs go after the meat. What do you think about that, Frank?
This is a deja vu for me. I think they already have been through this before. Unless I'm confusing the victims, back in 2021, this company suffered a massive ransomware attack. I think it was Rebel that...
Well, Re-Evil doesn't even exist anymore.
No, but they forced the old meat processing plants to shut down operations.
You're right. I looked it up. 2021. This is meat is the latest cyber victim. That's what happened in 2021. It doesn't say who did it.
I think it was Re-Evil.
Not their first rodeo with the cyber attacks.
Definitely not. Here we are again. And because they are one of the largest meat producers in the world, not the best surely, those would be the Argentinians. Last time the disruption actually shaped the whole global food supply chain and raised concerns about meat shortages and price spikes. This is a company that already learned the hard way how cyber attacks can crawl far beyond their own systems, all the way into supermarkets and national food supplies. For ransomware groups, that kind of pressure point is exactly what makes a target valuable. And to me, it's no surprise they're going after it again and again.
Yeah, I think after this one, Coinbase Cartel can use Arby's slogan, which is "We have the meats." But yeah, in all seriousness, this is the largest meat supplier in the world. At least they have been for recent decade. To Frank's point, that creates a lot of supply chain, right? Last time in 2021, food shortage. I'm sure something similar will happen again. And also, this is just a reminder, if anyone does have this mindset, if you're hit by ransomware once, not a one and done, you're definitely on the radar for subsequent attacks. But if someone found an entry point before, they know it's likely possible again. So definitely don't have the mindset of one and done for ransomware attacks.
Moving right along to story number 2. This is AkzoNobel, which is a multinational coating and chemicals manufacturer headquartered in the Netherlands. And Anubis ransomware goes on a trip to the Netherlands. That's right. AkzoNobel is a hundreds of year old coating and supply company. And they are one of the largest coatings and chemical manufacturers in the world. Industrial firms like these don't just make products, they manage complex engineering processes, supplier networks, and proprietary formulas. AkzoNobel wants you to paint the future. Well, Anubis made a painting that I don't think they like.
Yeah, not a company I was familiar with, but, and again, not a very flashy industry, but looked into it. In 2025, this organization had 10 billion euros in revenue. So definitely can see why they would be a target for a ransomware gang when money's involved. Makes you wonder how they get to that high revenue. Again, something where easy potential target, or a target that has at least a lot of revenue flow that the ransomware gang thinks has a chance to pay. Manufacturing, distribution type industries historically might have as much funding and cybersecurity type budgets, which might be another factor here for the targeting and reconnaissance phase of this. But definitely Anubis has the ability to paint some future attacks after this one.
You should know them. They collaborate with the McLaren MasterCard Formula One team.
That's why that car looks so fancy.
Mm-hmm. That's right. They are the official partner for coatings.
It's an interesting target because, in my opinion, industrial manufacturers like this, most valuable assets are not often customer databases, but the process knowledge. Attackers may get their hands in the engineering documentation, supplier relationships, production workflows, and so on. That kind of information can be extremely valuable in the wrong hands, not only for extortion, but also for competitors, industrial espionage.
Well, I just knew that this week, out of all weeks, we would be talking about Handala team. That's right. Handala team, well-known hacktivists in the Middle East who specifically target Israel and Israel-related cyber targets. And with everything going on in the world this week, we are now talking about Handala holding Israel Institute for National Security Studies, Israel Institute for National Security Studies, the INSS for ransom. That's right. This is a think tank out of Israel, intersection of academia, government, and strategic policy, which makes their data uniquely sensitive. You can see the INSS already talking about the military campaign against Iran, and that is very clearly part of Handala's targeting this week.
Well, with this kind of victim, the value of the data probably shifts from financial to geopolitical, just research, policy analysis, strategic assessments. And that often circulate among government officials and defense communities. Even drafts, internal communications, or research notes can reveal how policymakers are thinking about conflicts, how they're thinking about threats, or their internal relationships, postures. And that makes it uniquely sensitive. Those kinds of things could make organizations like this especially attractive to activists or politically motivated groups.
Obviously a very sensitive topic with what's going on in the world today, but we can see exactly why this group is being talked about this week. Again, with this target, Institute for National Security Studies, I'm sure there's sensitive information, right? It's a think tank for national security, a lot of ideas that come into fruition, a lot of, I'm sure, current activities are being discussed there and are hosted there. So definitely something with large global repercussions and very sensitive subjects. So I'll leave it there.
Well, next up is a name we all know well. LockBit has entered the scene. LockBit, not to be outdone by all these young upstart ransomware gangs, is now holding for ransom Atrium. Atrium is a United States professional services and technology firm. So this is not a new firm, but this is a new ransomware victim on LockBit. Professional services, like this firm, are extremely attractive targets because they centralize sensitive client data, financial records, and internal communications. You've recently had some windows and doors put in. What do you think about this one? Do you have ransomware gangs in your windows and doors, Frank?
No.
I've got your windows and doors to make sure they're free from ransomware.
I hope they help lowering the prices. That's all I can say.
I don't think attack is going to lower the windows and door prices.
What stands out here for me is that LockBit is still showing up in new claims, even after the massive law enforcement disruption earlier this year. And groups like this don't just disappear. They fragment, rebrand, keep operating in smaller pieces. So when their name pops up again, the question is not just about the victim, it's whether we're seeing the same old network quietly rebuilding itself. Regarding Atrium, breaches at professional services firms like these often stay under the radar longer than breaches at big consumer brands. When a retailer gets hit, millions of customers know this immediately. But when a consulting or services firm is compromised, the impact is often spread across different clients and projects, which can make exposure harder to detect and harder to contain.
With LockBit not letting the young guns try to pass them, I think for their standards, they had been off to a slow start to this year. But this month in March, off to a very fast start. We're 5 days, and it's really just 4 days into March, 4.5, and they've already got 12 victims. So right around 3 victims a day. So I think they might have seen they were being caught up to by some of the younger gangs and wanted to pick things up a bit. But in all seriousness, with this organization, which again looks to be windows and doors, a lot of, again, client information, supply chain information, usually businesses would be large companies, organizations like this. So you never know what kind of additional information that LockBit might find from this to go after other organizations. Can never sleep on the supply chain implications of attacks like this.
Kind of hard to maintain momentum, Connor, when half your crew gets sent to jail.
They must have restocked.
They kind of had to rework some networks.
Yeah.
Last story of the day is Vision Aero out of the United States. This is an aviation services provider. And they had a date with Qilin. That's right. Qilin getting into the aviation space, holding Vision Aero for ransom. Aviation vendors may look small compared to airlines, but they often hold operational logistics, maintenance records, and partner integrations across the entire ecosystem. Obviously, if you are targeting a government contractor, you are definitely going to add some pressure, especially when that government is sending a whole lot of planes to war. So interesting timing from Qilin, not letting this crisis go to waste.
Yeah, and that's another gang here off to a fast March start with 28 victims in 5 days from Qilin. Significant, almost 6 a day. And to your point, this is a company that supplies not only commercial airliners, but also military. And you have to wonder if the timing is suggestive or if it's just random. But either way, it's something, again, that has large manufacturing or supply chain implications to not only commercial travel potentially, but also in the military. So something could have significant impacts in these times.
Yeah, and also groups like Qilin don't always go after the biggest brand in the industry. Sometimes they go after smaller companies around it because those organizations often have fewer security resources, but still sit close to critical operations. And aviation is one of those industries where dozens of smaller companies quietly keep the whole system moving. And we already know that groups know, but sometimes it's easier to pressure the ecosystem rather than the airline itself.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot. I think it's pretty obvious that the way that hackers attack is they're no longer scanning infrastructure. They're no longer doing that outside-in scanning approach. They haven't done that in a long time. They're really scanning ecosystems. And if you want to go after the aircraft industry or military aircraft producers, why you go after the services providers? Well, this week, from global food suppliers and chemical manufacturers to security think tanks, aviation vendors, and professional services firms, ransomware groups continue targeting organizations where operational data and ecosystem access create maximum leverage. And increasingly, the real danger isn't just the company that gets breached, it's everyone connected to them. Pour a bourbon, patch your systems, and remember, attackers don't target industries, they target ecosystems.